Well, good afternoon. My name is Mark Maynard, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this Washington Labs Academy event. We hope you find today's presentation useful and informative. We have developed this monthly international approval series to deal with some of the technical and administrative issues that our customers face when obtaining global marketplace product approvals for electronic and electrical devices. We recognize that compliance engineering and certification challenges can be complex, and we're always looking for ways to support our customers. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. First, I hope everyone can see the title slide on your computer. Next, we have muted everyone's microphone to keep the meeting quality as high as possible. A recording of the presentation is underway and will be sent to all attendees and all those that registered. A full screen view may be preferred. Just select View and Full Screen then you can use Escape key to return to normal view. We encourage questions during the presentation. You can submit a question by enabling the chat or Q&A icon located at the top or side of your screen and typing your question to the host. We will go through all the questions at the end of the presentation as time permits. We'd like to hear from you. You can see our contact information here and at the end of the presentation. Please reach out via email to academy@wll.com or to the speaker directly. We estimate this presentation will take about an hour, including some time for questions at the end. I'm your presenter for today. I'm the Training and Business Development Manager for Washington Labs Academy. I also have a dual role at American Certification Body as the International Approvals and Business Development Manager. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and including areas like EMC, EMI, wireless telecom, product safety, design for the environment, and quality management systems, as well as environmental management systems. I'm a senior member of the IEEE and immediate past president of the Product Safety Engineering Society. And I'm very active with the annual IEEE EMC Society's conference, the EMC plus SIPI, which is Signal Integration Power Integration Symposium Committee. Some of the vocabulary we're going to need for today, if you're new to this series: local representative or local rep is an in-country agent who's authorized via a registered letter of authorization or a similar document, depending on what country you're in, to serve as an official for an importing manufacturing company. If you've already got a presence there with a company branch, that's who could serve as your local rep. There are some situations where they do require a special type of local rep for importation in some countries. The GDP PPP is gross domestic product or purchasing power parity basis, which kind of gives a rough estimate of the purchasing power for each country, kind of weighted per person. And that's just kind of a rough measure I use when we're looking at some of these market countries. It's not always clearly a compliance, can we get in there, but it's, do you want to be there? Is there a market for your products there? Then the population is just showing where it ranks in the grand order of things, with China at about 1.4 billion and the Pitcairn Islands is around 50. So also, what's the actual population size for your product? Is there going to be a market there when you weigh all those factors in? I want to give credit to for all the maps, photos, flag artwork, and country demographic information in this presentation. It's U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the World Factbook, and you can see, visit your own, the URL given here, and it's a good source for information. Unless I note otherwise, that's where all this information comes from. And the copyright notices, information on the Central Intelligence Agency website is in the public domain and may be reproduced, published, or otherwise used without the CIA's permission. And all they ask is to get credited, and that's what this page is doing here. Okay, so now we're going to get into the main part of today's presentation. We're looking at South Korea compliance agencies for most electronic products. We'll be looking at the EMC, RF, and telecom agencies, the radio research agencies, similar to the FCC in the US and the ISED in Canada. everything's in the scope of what they do. They got a little bit broader scope. They do some things that NIST does here as far as accreditation of labs and things. Then we're going to look at Product Safety Agency. That's Korean Agency for Technology and Standards, and then we'll have some summary and conclusions at the end. So South Korea is just west of Japan, and it's connected to the mainland of the Asian continent, next to China on this west side, and North Korea to the north. And I've noticed that, it's pretty common for people just to refer to South Korea as Korea, but it's important to distinguish that, especially in your compliance area. North Korea is one of the 5 countries that the U.S. has a total boycott on, except for a special humanitarian aid that's been approved in advance. So if you've got electronics or electrical products, you shouldn't be entertaining any ideas of going there if you're a U.S.-based country. There's some resources I provided here for the U.S. Department of Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, where you can find out about these sanctions programs per country. And there's also the U.S. Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security sanctioned destinations that has other information there. If you want to peruse those and learn more about countries that have these embargoes in place. So South Korea is a very attractive market. It's as people start to expand outside of the U.S. or Europe and go around the world. It's ranked 15th in the world for GDP PPP. It's the number 6 exporter of goods, number 10 importer. So you can see it's pretty attractive. Over $500 million in exports and just under $500 million in imports. They love high-tech products, just like Japan. So a very good market for high-tech. Majority of the population lives in urban areas. It used to be rural, but as it's modernized, its population is ranked 27th in the world. And you see with that GDP at 15th in the world, that shows that economically they're doing a lot better than most countries. Highly educated population, as you know, it's 17 years of education, so they're talking about on average, is going into graduate school for a lot of the population. Median age is 41.8 years, higher than the U.S., so they got more of an aging population there. High number of early tech adapters, as I was mentioning. Number 23 in the world for mobile cellular, 17 internet users, 10 landlines, and compared to their population ranking 27, it shows you that they've got more per capita than most countries. Large industrial base, as you probably know. They have large conglomerate companies. They're doing a lot of product development and manufacturing. Some of the names you're real familiar with, some Samsung, Kia, Hyundai, Hanwha. And all these companies are very, very diversified. For instance, Samsung, in addition to electronics, you're probably real familiar with, they also make industrial equipment, forklifts, other types of transport, as well as Hyundai and Hanwha. So diving into the EMC, RF, and telecom criteria that we got from the agencies there, just a little background. It used to be the KCC, but in 2013 they were reorganized and was the parent organization for the RRA, and it was renamed as the Ministry of Science, ICT, Information Planning. The ICT is for Information Communications Technology, so that you can see that applies to most of our wireless devices and computer, anything with a processor. So it's the parent ministry authority over RRA. They did have a logo change. Notice that you'll see this as we go through here. They're all using the same swirl pattern, yin-yang type of artwork for every agency. I'm not sure how it's supposed to help you distinguish between all the different agencies and ministries, but that's what they've done to give it a common look and feel, and it seems to be the symbol they're using for most of the Korean government. So it's no longer a stylized flower. It's now this red, white, and blue yin-yang symbol, which is the same colors as are in their flag. And I provided the homepage for the MSIP, where you can go and find out more information about it and the other agencies they oversee in addition to the RRA. So the Radio Research Agency is, if you notice on the logo, I've got in the upper right-hand corner there, National Radio Research Agency is its official name, but they always refer to it as the acronym RRA. And it's a government agency, and answers to MSIP as just mentioned. They had a logo change also with that stylized yin yang symbol. And I provided the homepage link there. And also at the end of, and throughout here, I've got other links that are useful to the agency websites where you can find more information on the actual standards and requirements. So one of the main things that happened 5 years ago was the certificate and registration number structure was changed. So instead of putting KCC on the product with the number or the logo, MSIP replaced that. So this should have been happened. It was grandfathered if the products were approved prior then, but everything that was grandfathered should have been recertified by now under the new standards. And you might want to check to make sure all your old products have the right markings now. They did make some major changes in application requirements with some relaxation on changing vendors for resistor, inductor, capacitor, or diodes, including LEDs. So these are things that are the same value components. For instance, you might have a 1 watt 10 ohm resistor and something. As long as you replace it with some of the same values, the same tolerance levels, and everything's the same electronically, you can do that. And reduce wattage in identical electronic circuits, so you can change a product that draws less energy, but not something that's going to draw more. And just on the marks, make sure that you're using the one at the bottom there, that stylized KC, what they're calling the KC mark. So before it was KCC with the marking numbers, and that should be MSIP. No longer should you have the KCC as the leading alphanumeric characters on that. So go a little more details on this, so you know what the marks mean if you haven't entered into South Korea before. So MSIP is always going to be the first 4. And then the next 3 are going to be throughout alphabet that they choose. So you notice, so what's in the V position here is either going to be C for certification, R for registration, or I for interim approval. That may be for a new technology device where they had to make a special test for, or something along those lines. So W, the next position there, is the testing category, either for radio, which would make it an R, or wired telecom, which is T, or E, electromagnetic, or M, multi, meaning it has more than one of these characteristics in there. So maybe a cell phone that has Bluetooth and broadband and Wi-Fi, and in addition has some type of electromagnetic function on there, would have an M. So X position is the applicant type, so M for manufacturer, I for importer, or S for seller. And then the remaining digits there, YYY, is going to be a 3-digit company code that's assigned by the RRI agency, so you have to get that number from them. It'll probably be in the correspondence or in the certificate. It'll also be on the certificate. And then the remaining up to 14 characters is the product ID, which is signed by the applicant and composed of letters, numbers, and hyphens. So you have some control over this. So the last 14 digits, you can, if you were, for instance, Dell, you can say Dell Opti and then whatever model, and so for your own internal reference. It's no longer a Class A or B marking requirement, and the preferred logo color is indigo. Or alternatively, it could be gold, silver, or black. And it must have a height of at least 5 millimeters. That's what they say is the minimum height for clear legibility for the unaided eye. And as most regulatory stickers, it has to be permanently affixed and not, easily removed or erased. So in addition to those markings, also some other label and packaging things. So you've got to have information on the product label that says certificate, and the packaging also, the certificate holder, model number, manufacturer date, manufacturing country of origin, so they can track that from the outside, and for importation. For small devices, only KC marking must be on the product, with additional information placed only on the individual package. And for extremely small devices, they do make allowance for marking on the packaging only, but they have to prove that. You can't just tell them it's too small. They have to tell you whether it's too small. So make sure you're working with the agency and not making that decision on your own. So the testing must be performed in RA approved lab. You're not going to be able to take your FCC or EU, red reports and just have them rubber stamp it. They do have a special voltage and frequency combination there. It's 220 volts at 60 hertz. That's from the American influence from us helping to rebuild their infrastructure there, I'm sure. But that's a very unique combination. I'm not aware of any other country in the world that has it. The testing has to be performed at 220 volts AC at 60 hertz. The reports have to reflect that and document it. They also have to be in the required RA format, so they're not going to accept something as FCC or whatever. They do have some immunity items tested in there. It's based on CISPR 22 and 24. They are transitioning to the CISPR 32 and 35, but it's basically the full EMC gamut and then some selected immunity tests. And standard submittal documentation you expect for any agency, EMC or wireless. It's internal, external construction photos in the test reports, user manuals in the native language with Korean, operating instructions for the test setup, application forms that they require, and local representative information. So that's going to be who's your representative of the country that RA can go to if there's ever a need for a product recall or some other issue with your products in that country. Class AB statements, as I mentioned on the label, it's no longer required to be shown, but they do require this to be in the manual, and basically saying it's either Class A for business use only or Class B and it can be used anywhere, home or business. For anything has a 2.4 gigahertz radio in there, so that could be Wi-Fi or just a non-specific RF radio device. It's got to have this warning message. Saying that could interfere with other devices, including medical electronics or things like that. So the normal certification procedure is they're going to, the applicant's going to be involved with the testing and KCC certificates. They're going to make sure that they've got designated test labs that have been approved and by the agencies, and then it's going to have loops for the label production of cells from the applicant. They're going to be responsible for that, but it is going to be reviewed by the agency through market surveillance. And then on the testing, that you got to make sure you got a accredited body for the testing for RA, and it's done by an accredited lab from RA. Make sure you've got your test setup instructions, product specs, theory of operation docs, and any peripherals, the special peripherals required for operation. Most the test labs will have the standard keyboard, mouse, and monitors, those types of things. But if it's something unique, make sure that those go along with your test samples so they can be correctly tested in the actual configuration of the system. So on SAR requirements, and they've got a lot of information on their website about this, almost pretty much the same as FCC SAR limits, but there's some differences on how they classify the body and limbs. They're following the same IEC 62209 parts 1 and 2 for the standard, and they have a listing of 16 designated products. Most electronics that you're going to use, near your body or your limbs or your head, is covered in there with the cell phones, the portable computers, any wearables, all that kind of thing. There are some special, they use the limb SAR limit in the normal use mode condition, and then they have a 20 milliwatt SAR requirement exemption determined by the conducted average power one channel, not by EIRP or ERP as the FCC does. And then there is a mutual recognition agreement between the U.S. and Korea that's in phase 1 on the recognized U.S. labs. that have been, as I mentioned, they're on the RA list. South Korea allows for SAR modular certification, and the FCC KDB prescribed test method may be used. And I just had the caveat from 5 years ago when they changed over on this stuff. So that was grandfathered before January 1st, 2013, but everything that was grandfathered should have had been retested by now with some kind of update. And so make sure that you have retested to the new standards and limits. So here's some resources for the Radio Research Agency, so their homepage, and then the specific landing page for technical regulations and national standards. All this is in English. The specific absorption rate requirements, the SAR testing, and the conformity assessment system on how it's set up and the processes and procedures you have to go to. It's a very good website for finding out more information on these requirements. Now we're going to look at the Product Safety Agency. So they had a reorg back in 2013 too on the ministry level, and Ministry of Knowledge and Economy was renamed Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, and they're the governing body, government body over CATS, which is the Product Safety Agency. So the legislative framework for product safety. So the main document is the Framework to Act on the Safety of Products, and then there's various other the Electrical Appliances Consumer Product Safety Control Act. It defines the criteria for safe products, how to protect consumers and their lives, bodies, and property from risk of electric shock, fires, mechanical hazards, and other similar devices you're used to. Framework Act Consumers provides more, for as far as the penalties, liabilities, and the Act on Fair Labeling and Advertising. One has to be on the labels. Product Liability Act is, what can be held accountable. And all these are available in English from the KCA website. That's Korea Consumer Agency. And so this is the laws that all these requirements are based on for product safety. And I've provided the link for that at the bottom of this page. So they do allow for recalls and bans, if it's for safety reasons, if it poses harms to consumers, then they're going to pull it off the market or stop it from coming in the country. And for anything that's deemed dangerous to a human consumer. It's a government agency. It's been around for a long time, since 1883, although there have been several name changes. They're an active member of the ISO and IEC standards organizations, and this is their main homepage I've provided here. It's also at the end of the presentation. So they weren't reorged, but they do have a new logo. As I mentioned, for all the other agencies, they're using the stylized yin-yang symbol. So when you look up all these websites, they're all going to look the same as far as that logo goes. So it doesn't really make any distinguishing. Look for the words. So earlier, we just want to make sure products are safe. They're keeping up with all the modern methods for test and enforcement, and making sure that they're bringing electronics to their citizens so they can have the same advantages and accomplishments that are seen around the world with these electronic devices. So they work with the international standards organizations. I mentioned ISO and IEC, and they manage their legal metrology system, their measurements, weights and measurements like we have in the U.S. They accredit the testing labs and the testing procedures and standards. They're going to conduct research on this and also work with the international bodies. So one change that happened back in 2014 was there used to be an exemption for anything that was below 50 volts AC and 50 volts DC. But now that doesn't matter. Anything at or below 1,000 volts AC or DC, and that goes down to 0 volts. So anything from 0 to 1,000 is regulated now. So make sure that you aren't following some old exemption because your product is, safety extra low voltage or something. Is still regulated under these. They're going to be looking for South Korea's CB scheme. That's the IEC CB scheme for product safety reports, international system. And South Korea is a member country, so they accept those, but it's got to have the country-specific deviations, which I'll get to in a minute. So the stuff you're submitting is like you expect for most of these product safety submittals. You got the CB report from an authorized test lab, including the technical report summary, circuit diagrams, functional block diagrams, test samples, label drawings, a sample, user manual, and the required safety statements have to be in Korean. If it's an industrial device, the whole manual doesn't have to be in Korean, but if it's going to be something that can be used by a consumer, it will need to be in Korean. Detailed product photos, internal and external, and AC cord and plug information is very important. It's got to follow a specific Korean standard, which I'll mention in a minute here. And here's my mention. It's got the CB test report I'm talking to has got to have the country-specific deviations, and that includes for South Korea that same 220 volts at 60 hertz, and the AC plug or power cord in conformity with the Korean standard KSC 8305. So you've got to, I would recommend you purchase an already approved cord, because that can be a kind of a lengthy process if you're trying to get your own cord approved. And there's plenty of companies out there that will provide those. And make sure you get documentation on everything, including the certifications that show it's approved. You have to include IEC or the Korean agency approval information of all the critical components there. That's all the safety critical components, so anything that's got a large current or voltage, carrying ability, dissipates a lot of heat, is going to be, devices are going to have to be documented. And the report must be less than 3 years old. And the real, as they are with most everything, the real sticklers on this. If you're submitting a report to them that's going to expire, it's going to pass that 3 years in a week, they're probably going to reject it because they're not going to finish the approval by the time before that report expires. So make sure you've got several months left on your certificate, or go ahead and start the renewal process for it. That'll save you a lot of heartache if you got something that's near that 3-year period. Do you require factory inspections and approvals for anything as mandatory certification requirements, and they're established with the MOUs or the memorandums of understanding? And each factory has to be inspected and pass all the requirements. They can have multiple factories on one factory approval certificate. The same product models produced in separate factories. And in-country testing required for any new factory is added to the existing certificate. So if you've got factories in China or elsewhere, they're making products you're shipping to South Korea, those are going to have to be inspected also. And summary and conclusions for today. Make sure you find a reliable, knowledgeable partner. As I mentioned, they're real sticklers for the requirements, and you got to fully comply with everything. They don't like making exceptions or giving you much wiggle room. If the standard said it has to be done, then it has to be done. Otherwise, you're going to be banging your head against a wall in a lot of cases. Be sensitive to local business customs. There's plenty of information out there. Watch some YouTube videos on how South Korean businessmen conduct, and make sure that you aren't committing a faux pas or insulting your host when you meet with them by not adhering to those customs there. And agency contacts are critical. If you don't have any agency contacts, make sure you're working with somebody that does. Verify the test labs have the required accreditations. I mentioned for both of these, EMC and product safety, they've got to be accredited by these agencies. You'll have a lot of people that will tell you, yeah, I can do South Korea testing, but if they're lab and accredited, those reports are worthless to you. You can't use them for submittals in South Korea. And make sure all those country-specific deviations are documented in the required report format. As I mentioned, 220 volts at 60 hertz, that's unique to South Korea. And make sure you have that there. And then all the mandated safety warnings for product and any user manual documented as well. So once again, here's the main websites, but scattered throughout this presentation are more specific landing pages within each of these. I've included the Google Translate. It does a pretty good job translating Korean to English, but if you're translating, for instance, standards that are only in Korean to English, those cannot be relied upon as your official translated standard. You've got to, you have to get one from the official translated version from the agencies or an official translator that they send you to. But for most information, the Google Translate does a really good job. Just copy and paste a block of text into it. It'll automatically find the language, or if it doesn't, you can just tell it's Korean and on the left side, English to the right. So it's a useful tool when you're going around for these international approvals. So now I'm going to see what we've got in questions today. It looks like I've received at least one here. No, several here. Does it take state voltage 220 testing in any document? Yes, in their standards with their the Korean version of it, they do call out their country specific, especially for CB reports, but also for the EMC, they will be rejected in my experience. I worked at a large ITE company for 20 years, and that was one of the issues we constantly faced. The engineers thought they could take some shortcuts and just use the EU voltage of 230 volts at 50 hertz, but when it's documented in the report and they catch that, it's not what they want, so they'll send it back. Are there exemptions? Hang on a minute, I'm having trouble reading this one. Are there exemptions for equipment used in military applications? Yes, definitely. Those would fall under the military standards, and they can all, as you may be aware, in the military, I'm not sure if you're talking about South Korea military or United States military, but they can make exceptions for any product they deem necessary to support their specific branch of the Army or Navy, whatever they're using it. So if that would be a specialized category, make sure you're using the right standards and using a partner who knows what the difference are. Can manufacturers create docs using EMC system reports and CB report cert? Well, if it's tested in an authorized lab, you can, but the lab's going to be preparing the reports, and that's which is the requirement. They require those reports to be submitted by the authorized labs. So I'm not sure that you would gain anything. You can't just take the data and stick it in a report and send it to them. It's got to be an authorized lab that's producing that. If I've missed your question, intent of your question, you can always email me and give me some more details on it. Is it mandatory to submit the CB reports and docs to CATS? Actually, you can have your products tested in country under the Korean standards. It's not a requirement that you have to use CB reports, so you can use the Korean specific reports, have it tested at an authorized lab in South Korea, and get the approvals you need that way. Other one, is there a different test condition between 230 volts for the EU and 220 volts Korea based on technical view? Personally, I've never, we're talking about the difference between 50 and 60 hertz power. I haven't ever seen a difference in emissions or in meeting the safety standards. So from a technical view, just purely engineering, I'd say it's fine by me, but I'm not the regulator that makes the requirements. That's the Korean agencies, and they said it is a difference and they want to see it. Next question, what does U.S. manufacturer want when they want to get Korean certification? Most want when they want to get Korean certification. I'm going to interpret this to mean what's most needed. So I mentioned with the one issue about the 220 volts and 60 hertz, excuse me, and make sure you're using, I'd say the most important consideration is make sure you're using authorized test labs. I've had more than a few customers who come to us with the test lab, with the test lab said, yo, sure, we can do that, and they'll make a report, but they're not an authorized lab, and we can't use that for submittal. It's got to be an authorized lab. It says, is in-country testing mandatory for all products for product safety or just for a new factory that is open? Well, as I mentioned, you can have, if it's a CB authorized lab and been recognized by CB scheme, members of the CB scheme, and it's been recognized by the CATS agency, then they can be tested in the labs anywhere in the world that have that accreditation. Any new factory that's producing the product will have to be inspected. Any factory will have to be inspected, to say it that simply. If it's manufacturing the product, you're getting approved. If it's going to be shipping products to South Korea, with the South Korean markings on it. And is radiated immunity required up to 6 hertz? You can go to specific standards, and CISPR 22 and 24. If it's required in there, it will be the same requirements for South Korea. Another question: you heard of the KC code format starting with RR? No, I have not. I only know that it's using MSIP is the only recognized format right now. It used to be KC, but no longer. It just has to start with MSIP to identify it as a product, the certification number for a product for South Korea. How can I get a qualified information if my product is regulated? I'm not sure the intent of the question exactly, but the best source of information is from the agent. Oh, okay, I'm seeing what you're saying. How can you get a qualified opinion? Basically, your product has to be, certified. That'll be from the. You can go to the agency directly, or use a, certification body that obtains approvals for South Korea, or an agent in the country. Somebody that is. It's best you can get it referred by your peers that have dealt with a company before, and a specific agent. But the agencies are always the best source of information. You can find a lot of these answers on those websites with the links I've given you. And there will also be contact information for the agencies where you can email them. It may not always be fast responses, but they can. Some are better than others, but it's a good source. Anything you get directly from the agency is better than from a third-party source. But if you are working third parties, just find ones that are experienced and have done that. This isn't the first time getting a South Korean approval. Okay, the last question I've got on the Q&A portion. For DC-powered IT equipment, is it mandatory to include a power supply that takes 220 volts AC, 60 hertz? No, but if it's the DC powered, then you're going to, whatever your power supply is going to have to be approved from a safety standpoint for that device. If it's solely battery powered, that's fine, but it's going to have the same protection circuits in there for a complete short situation, or whatever the safety considerations are for that type of power. You don't have to artificially make an AC power supply for something that's powered solely by DC. And let's see, I'm going to check chat here, and I don't see any questions there. So that's all the questions I've got for today. If you think of something else, please contact me. Here's my email address, markm@wll.com. Be glad to hear from you. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can send me messages there. If you have a compliance project, if you need approval for South Korea or anywhere else in the world, contact Washington Laboratories at our general email address is info@wll.com. You'll get a response within 24 hours. There's a direct phone line there. And then we have our website, which has a lot of information too. And be glad for you to go there and visit and find some more information, a lot of information on the international approvals, and especially the test lab capabilities that we've got at our 2 sites in the Washington, D.C. area. Do want to mention coming up next year in July is going to be the 2019 symposium put on by the Electromagnetic Compatibility Society of the IEEE. That's the EMC plus CB Symposium. That's System Integrity and Power Integrity is what the CB stands for. It's always a very informative event. The main part of the conference is it's a 5-day conference. There's tutorials and training classes on Mondays and Fridays from beginner level through very senior level, technical presentations and classes. There's also INARDI certification, a prep on Monday, and you can take the test to become an EMC engineer on that Friday. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the main technical presentations and papers you can get on a wide variety of topics related to the EMC and CIPI. Everybody from NASA is there talking about space EMC, military, consumer products, ITD, just every aspect you can think about, wireless, telecom, and if you're a EMC professional, a wireless telecom professional, this is the event to go to for the year. Their call for papers is open. If you've never written paper before, it's a really good way to build up your resume and to learn that you might have ability you didn't know about. So you can go to the website and see more information on that about the papers, or you can contact me if you've got any questions. That's my IEEE email address, mmaynard@IEEE.org. I want to tell you about our upcoming webinars. And next month on the 13th, non-EU European compliance. This is all the European countries, and including Russia, that are not members of the European Union. And a lot of them do accept EU, even though not member countries. But there's others, such as Russia and its consortium of 5 countries that was set up as a competitor with the EU, and they've got a common set of requirements. And what's going on with them. January 10th, going to Africa compliance on the 25 largest market countries. That's about half the countries in Africa. It's around 50 there. We'll talk about if you're expanding into that continent, which is going to be the growth area I foresee over the next 50 years. So it's a good place to get in now. Australia and New Zealand compliance on February 14th, so you can celebrate your Valentine's Day with us at noon on the Central Time, and 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and 10 o'clock on the West Coast. You can go to our website for the Washington Labs Academy, shown at the bottom here, to find out more. So please contact me if you have any questions on the content of today, or projects you got upcoming, or just anything in general. I am going to be this weekend at the IEEE Product Safety Engineering Society's conference in Boston. It's called the Symposium on Product Compliance Engineering, and it covers everything from product safety, environmental, military, EMC, wireless telecom. You can sign up. It's a 2-day conference, Monday and Tuesday next week, and you can just show up and come for a day or come for both days. If you want more information on that, you can just Google IEEE SPCE 2019, and it'll take you to the web page for that. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate you joining me. As I mentioned, there was a recording of this going on, and it'll be sent out to everybody that registered, along with a PDF slide deck. And hope to see you next month. Thanks for your time and showing up today.